I'm going to go right into my message for the day and say that memory is a really blessed thing. The things that we come together and share, the stories that we tell, usually we stick to the sweetest parts of the past. Just like with milk, if you sit it out, the cream comes to the top. So with our memories, do we remember the things that are best the longest? Light breaking through in the dark of a world that's sometimes confusing. Remembrance is something that I would say is a bit different than just recollection. It's easy to say, well, last week I went to the store, but it's something completely different when while sitting down somewhere you suddenly remember the taste of your great aunt's walnut cake. Something that has haunted me for the last month as I have realized it is very hard to get black walnuts just on a whim. But that remembrance is the thing that allows us to look at what has happened and begin to put it into a filter of what will happen in the future. There's a reason that Christ, when having that first celebration of communion with his disciples at the Last Supper, says, "Do this in remembrance of me." That every time we come to this table, we remember what Christ has done, but not just remember it, we re-experience it. Today, as we gather together, we do so to attest to the legacy that this church has had, where we come together from our church's diaspora to talk about the things that we have done. We celebrated our history as Anna Jean recounted her time here. We talked about all the different things we did as members of Northview United Methodist Church throughout our community, through the jobs that we had, the kids that we raised, the families that we were a part of. And the fact of the matter is that this church has touched every aspect of the world around it. Now that may seem like an exaggeration, but again, we just have to think of how many people we interact with on a regular basis. It's a little less now, post-pandemic, let's be honest. You're not usually talking to people in the supermarket quite as often as you used to. Some of you might be. I know some people who they go into the supermarket and they talk to everyone they meet. They scare me, but those people exist. But all the same, think of just when you go to the supermarket, minimum you're going to talk to 3 or 4 people. When you go to the DMV, again, several people, and if you work at the DMV, I can only imagine how many people Andrea sees on a regular basis, and so on and so forth. Every interaction we have affects people, because they'll go on to meet more people who keep going on and continuing that cycle. From a little church in the corner of a neighborhood, small even in comparison to the rest of Clarksburg, there is ripples that go out and touch the entire world, that tell everyone what it is to be a child of Christ. We celebrate today not just the past, but the future. Celebrating 4 graduates, 3 of whom have finished their master's degree, which is something that, as people have told me, is not something we've celebrated before, at least not that many people at once. Each going forward to serve the world in different ways. Healthcare, teaching, going off to work further in intervention studies or in law enforcement of some way, something in the justice system. All of these solid plans mixed with far-flung hopes to create what is the future. Being willing to go forward and do work that needs to be done for the good of all people around them. Like a small seed that falls into the earth and suddenly produces hundreds times more than it ever was alone, a young person who is raised in love, support, and affirmation goes forward to cause more good than any generation before them could even dream of. Paul wrote Philippians sitting in a jail cell, and not just sitting in a jail cell, but the final jail cell he would sit in his entire life, waiting for his execution in Rome. And sitting in the midst of that darkness, he decided to have hope rather than despair. But that hope wasn't abstract. That hope was based on the people of God who he was raising up in the faith before he went into prison. As anyone who has been through tough times can attest, and especially anyone who has ever had to sit in a jail cell could say, people are immensely important. People are the things that get you through hard times. The people who you remember are out there waiting for you. We do not think of any aspect of life or faith except through how people show it to us. And in that moment, Paul, constrained, could do nothing but look out at the people he knew were doing God's work and find infinite hope in what they were doing. For those of us gathered here today who hold the past as something we were a part of, and those of us who have an entire future ahead of them yet uncharted, we find ourselves in a similar place to Paul. Now, granted, not locked up as Paul was, but still people who are part of what was looking forward to what people are doing now. People who saw the wide arc of history, and people who are still going up the hill of life. The young people we celebrate today may go any number of places in the future. Some may remain local in their work. Some may go all across this nation, even the world, to do the things that they are committed to. But either way, they continue to grow in knowledge and wisdom and faith and goodness. And whatever the people we celebrate do today, the duty of those of us who send them off into the adventure that they undertake is to support them fully. As Paul, we must constantly think of them as Christ does, as beloved children, sibling, and friends, praying that their life is full of joy, free of trial, and that they constantly grow in every aspect of faith and life. For those who we celebrate, the message is very much the same. As they go out into the world, we ask them to remember those who have supported them and wish them all love and support going forward. I do think that a larger burden ultimately is placed on younger people than older people, to make sure that growing into the world, they are changing it, making it better, but also keeping up with the people they leave behind, supporting their family, supporting the loved ones who they had in the past while constantly moving forward. Those who press on, working here locally in the church in Northview, we keep our heads to the grindstone. We continue to do all that we can. But it's the young people going out, people who are going to be the leaders of tomorrow, who have to blaze a trail all their own, to go out and do and change. 20-somethings, 30-somethings, all of them are the future. And here in the church, we're committed in the next year to make sure that plenty of young people are put on committees. Not just people in their 20s and 30s, but people in their teens, people who are just going into the age where they're able to participate in these things. But to expand constantly so that the future and the past are always working with one another. At moments like the one we find ourselves in now, we celebrate what God has done in all time. The building, older than all of us here, has seen a great deal of change all throughout the years. It didn't used to have an addition here. As Jeannie once tried to explain to me, there were 3 different entrances and 3 different spots that just aren't entrances anymore. She drew a map for me and I got horribly confused what this building could possibly have looked like. And that might just be that we're bad at drawing. But still, this building has seen changes, physical, but it's also seen changes in more abstract senses. You can go in this hallway and see all the ministers who have come through, ministers with different leadership styles, different plans, different visions. You can look at the cornerstone on one side of the building and the other, along with all our different accoutrements of the EUB, to know that this has been 3 different denominations throughout its history. This church attests to the fact that things change, that the world goes on. And while we glory in the past for all that it contributed to us, there's also a light that shines out. Not just the big light on the side of the building with a cross and flame, but a light generally that attests that the people of this congregation are more than just what was and what is. That we're constantly changing, evolving to be the people that God has called us to be. And long may that light of hope burn here. May this church continue to attest to the goodness of God. But beyond what is here, there is always transformation. If we listen to young people, not just in our congregation, but throughout the world, then we will trust that we have raised them well enough that they can be depended upon. We can raise up people and trust that they will come to outshine us, that they should outshine us. The prayer that Paul had, that the Philippians would increase in knowledge and insight, is not a prayer for one people at one time. It is a prayer for everyone always. We must pray that God constantly asks us to move a little bit more forward, to go into new places. For only through that kind of transformation will we understand what God is doing in the here and now. A small child will lead them, said a prophet long ago, but I would say it slightly differently. That the children who we have raised are now going to raise us up. If only we follow their example as they once followed ours. A wise man, or I should say a wise Muppet, once said, "Teachers are what their students grow beyond." Lord, may we believe that that is true. That each of the people we celebrate today not only meet our dreams, our expectations, our hopes for them, but far exceed them in ways that we can only begin to imagine now. May they be blessed to outshine us in every conceivable way. For theirs is the future, and theirs is a legacy that they will carry forward into all the world. From its roots here in Northview, from this state of West by God, Virginia, and forward to all nations and all places. Amen? Amen. Amen.